welcome to this last class on Buddhist mindfulness this year, if you go by the Christian calendar, 2023. David and I were talking, David being the other volunteer with me here on Wednesday nights, and I were talking that a lot of people may be traveling. However, there's a few of us here, and I know that there's at least a couple of people online. I can never tell how many, but I just wanted to say a heartfelt welcome to this class on Buddhist mindfulness. And tonight it seems to be more conducive to give the reflections first. So we're going to have the meditation in the second half. Hope that's okay with you. We have a guided meditation normally leading into silence, and I hope that you all benefit from that. And the topic that I felt would be maybe most beneficial for the end of the year would be a topic related to self-compassion. And in this case, I would like to offer a few reflections on self-forgiveness in particular. I think if I ask if there is anyone who might have sort of some leftover sense of, oh, I wish I hadn't done that this year, or I wish, I hadn't created this sort of harm or hurt for this particular person, or maybe even a group of people. And yet, here it is, here we are sitting with our open and vulnerable hearts, hopefully. And so I just wanted to offer a few reflections about how to work with self-forgiveness, especially as we're coming very close to the end of the year, so that we can all begin anew and fresh in the new year. And I know that even just a few years ago, if I had sat in your seat and somebody said, I'm going to talk about forgiveness, I would have probably gotten up and left. Because there was one particular person that I really was not ready to forgive and had to do a lot more healing work for in order to come to that place. So I just wanted to say ahead of time that the practice of forgiveness is really just offered as a process, maybe even as just opening a tiny door today. And if you prefer to keep the door completely shut, that's fine. Maybe you can just sit and listen and participate in the meditation. But just to say that forgiveness, it's not something that just happens magically because there's a talk given or a guided meditation. It often is a long process connected with pain and with grief and sorrow. And so I'm just wanting to give these offerings, like I said, for the end of the year. And so really compassion is a very important part of the Buddha's teaching, along with mindfulness. The Buddha always made it very clear that mindfulness needs to go hand in hand with a loving attention for whatever is in our hearts, with whatever is up in our being that comes up during the meditation practice. So to really practice Buddhist mindfulness and meditation in the spirit of kindness towards oneself. And just like when we practice loving kindness, and a few of you might have been here earlier this year when I gave a talk, well, actually several talks on the 4 heart practices of Buddhism, which are basically the practices of loving kindness, of compassion, of appreciative joy, and of equanimity. So today is a part of compassion when we talk about forgiveness practice. And just like with loving kindness practice, oftentimes when we sit down and we begin to offer loving kindness beginning towards ourselves, because that's often suggested in terms of resourcing ourselves first and feeling kindly and caring towards ourselves so that we can then extend it to others. Oftentimes what happens in this practice, and it's the same with compassion, and in particular self-compassion for a lot of us, is that maybe the opposite will come up. So we're beginning to sit and offer ourselves compassion and certain techniques that go with it. And then you might be surprised, and there's a lot of self-judgment coming up, or even for some of us, self-hatred. And just to know that that is indeed part of the process, because if that's something that lives in us when we start offering self-compassion or loving kindness, those things will also come up along with the offerings. And that's where oftentimes, or that's rather why oftentimes, the practices of loving kindness and also self-compassion are considered detoxification processes, where we bring up, the opposite of the loving kindness that's also maybe sitting heavily in our heart, and we just keep saying the loving kindness phrases, or tonight we'll do a different practice related to self-compassion that might at first bring in the opposite, and just to know it could happen, and if it does, please don't worry, it's just part of the process, and I'll give some guidance around that. So there's a particular Buddhist teacher that sort of interested me several years ago. She's a Zen, American Zen Buddhist teacher by the name of Sherry Huber. And she dedicates a lot of her teachings to this topic of self-compassion. And so there's books that I've read, such as these books that I just want to highlight, called, one of them being There's Nothing Wrong with You, and the other one, Making a Change for Good. And in these books, she really talks about these conditioned voices that often come up inside of our psyche, in particular if we practice meditation. So these are sort of voices of self-judgment that when we start paying attention, when we bring mindfulness to what's going on in our mind, what we often will discover, oh my gosh, I didn't realize there's all these messages of judgment towards myself, and even sometimes self-hatred. So what I did, I actually followed along these teachings, these suggestions from her books, and I practiced basically a mindful writing practice along with her, where I would write in my journal every day. I would sit in meditation and just simply observe, okay, what's going on in my mind right now? And oftentimes there would be these voices like, I'm not good enough, I didn't do well enough, I can never measure up. And I have an inkling that might be true for you as well. I have an inkling that I'm not the only one sitting here that has those voices maybe coming up inside of themselves sometimes. So she just suggests to work with that and to really just become aware, and if you can, to write down these voices, because it's really already the first step to have them out there written down, where you bring a separation and you begin to soften around them and no longer identify with them, such as this is me, mine, and myself, this voice that's telling me I'm a horrible person, I can't measure up, I'm never good enough. And just to know these are just habit energies that come up for us that we have probably learned and incorporated into our being when we were much younger, maybe messages that we were giving by our caretakers, maybe by teachers, by coaches, by society at large. It's very common in our society to be given, criticisms, or be pointed out things that we don't do wrong, and then we incorporate it into our being, into our mind, and we then turn around and turn against ourselves oftentimes as part of our life path. So years ago, after the initial Western Buddhist teachers in the 1970s had come back from places like India and Burma and Thailand, people like Jack Kornfield and Joseph Goldstein, Sharon Salzberg, and so forth. They had a meeting with the Dalai Lama after they initially began teaching or start offering these Buddhist teachings in Western countries. And basically the Dalai Lama said, how is it going with that? How are the teachings being received in the West? What are you experiencing amongst your students? And in response, the teachers predominantly asked the Dalai Lama for help. They said that they had found that a lot of the students in the West had very deep self-hatred and self-judgments. So even though the Dalai Lama, if you've ever heard him in interviews in English, his English is quite well, and yet when the Western teachers mentioned about self-hatred, he turned to his translator and he didn't really understand this word, self-hatred. And so he engaged in a conversation in Tibetan with his translator, and finally there was this aha moment and he understood what this word actually meant. And when he comprehended the meaning, he basically spoke up and said, but this is a mistake. In other words, it's not something that exists in his culture from what he knew of, that people would be so judging towards themselves. So he was really surprised by that. So very much learning the art of self-forgiveness allows us to live in this larger spirit of compassion that I talked about earlier, and how that's a very big part of Buddhist teachings. And it also helps us to become more compassionate and forgiving towards others when we have learned to really tend to our hearts, allow ourselves to be vulnerable, and really bring a loving, tender care towards our own experiences. And as I said, I'm pretty sure that all of us at some point or another in our lives have acted in ways that were harmful towards others. You don't have to raise your hand, but I certainly am one of them. So, and for some of us, it's really hard, because for some of us, maybe even sitting in this meditation hall, whatever we might have done in terms of harming or hurting another being or beings, be it a person or an animal or maybe even a tree, to some of us, these actions that we might have committed in the past might have or might feel so grave to us that we find it difficult to forgive ourselves. So there's a story by Jack Kornfield, one of the foremost American Buddhist teachers, who also is my teacher. He tells the story of a Hindu man who sought advice from Gandhi. This was during the time of the wars in India between Muslims and Hindus, and this man sat in an audience, or had the great fortune to be in a group with Gandhi, and he came up after Gandhi was speaking, and he was sobbing and confessing to Gandhi that he had killed a Muslim child. And he was really beside himself, and he said, I'm never going to be able to forgive myself. I don't know what to do. He was just so grief-stricken. And he basically turned to Gandhi for help and said, how can I live with myself? What can I do? And Gandhi reflected for a moment, and then he suggested that the man adopt a Muslim child. And in fact, this man did, and apparently he raised this child just with utter love. And that was his way of being able to forgive himself for what he had done in the past. And so the practice of forgiveness has a dignity to it that allows us to help lift the burdens of the past from our hearts in many ways. And it's really important to understand that what forgiveness means and what it doesn't mean. So I just wanted to highlight that. What does forgiveness mean and what does it not mean? And so just wanted to say that forgiveness isn't weak. It's not naive. It takes real courage to be forgiving. And it doesn't mean to forgive and forget. It doesn't condone what happened or what another has done that caused harm. And in fact, with forgiveness, the most skillful response that we can give may be never again. I will do everything in my power to prevent this harm from continuing or anyone else from being harmed. And so forgiveness in that way is not a covering over of what happened. can be, like I said in the beginning of this talk, a long process of grief, of tears, of anger, of regret, of pain. And the key here is to engage in this process and allow the heart to be broken open and free itself. And I know that for myself, it was a very long process to begin to forgive my mother. I grew up with a mother with a very severe narcissistic personality disorder. There was a lot of rage. There was a lot of emotional abuse. And it took me many years to forgive that, and really only, ironically, in the last years when she started having dementia, her being really softened and the rages stopped. And I felt like I could have a relationship with her. And whereas prior to that, I really had to set some really strict boundaries for my own well-being, for my own healing to take place. And in this case, it has a happy ending in many ways, but I just want to say that sometimes this boundary and knowing, no, this is not someone to be healthy to be around. I might be able to forgive that person, but it doesn't mean this person can be in my life, even if it's a close family member. We can forgive from a distance if that's what we feel in our heart, but that's what we have to do for ourselves. And there's this beautiful story, again, a story that I heard Jack Kornfield tell, of the Jewish mystical tradition, the Kabbalah. And so there's a story of a great rabbi who taught his disciples to memorize, to reflect, to contemplate, and to place the teachings of the holy words on their heart. And one day, one of the rabbi's students asked him why he always used the phrase "on your heart." And the rabbi replied, "Only something greater than yourself can put the teachings in your heart. Here we recite and learn and put them on the heart, hoping that one day when your heart breaks, they will fall in." So we practice forgiveness both to release ourselves from the past and also to allow the heart to finally break open and to renew the original goodness that, at least in Buddhism, we believe that we are all born with a Buddha nature. In other traditions, you might call it a God nature, but we believe that we all carry a very deep goodness inside of our hearts that might have been covered up by causes and conditions in our lives, but they do exist in our deepest selves. So, like I said earlier, forgiveness is not a quick fix, and it isn't really for others either. It's to lift the burden of harshness, of hatred, of pain in our own heart. And someone said, and I don't remember who, but it always struck me as so beautiful. Someone said, "Forgiveness means giving up all hope for a better past." Forgiveness means giving up all hope for a better past. So we all have been betrayed. We all have been hurt or abandoned or harmed by others. And this is really what we share in common as human beings. We're vulnerable, we're tender, frightened at times, and we all have our measure of sorrows and pain. And so in that spirit, I would like to offer a meditation on self-forgiveness this evening. So don't worry if you've never meditated before, this is still hopefully going to benefit you. Just maybe take a moment to take your seat, your posture for meditation. And when you do so, it's just really suggested that you sit up somewhat tall so that there can be alertness in the mind, and at the same time a softening in the body. If it feels beneficial, please close your eyes. If it doesn't for some reason, maybe you can just find a gaze point on the ground in front of you so that there's still an invitation to have the attention inwardly drawn. And maybe just beginning here by taking a few deep and long breaths, feeling the body and the heart opening with the in-breaths. And then inviting a sense of relaxation and letting go with the out-breaths. Feeling the aliveness in the body as you draw in these bigger and deeper breaths. And then again, just a softening as you breathe out long and complete. And eventually you can just allow your breath to find its own natural rhythm. And with each in-breath, simply being aware that you're breathing in. With each out-breath, being aware that you're breathing out. And just allowing the breath to breathe in its own way. Some breaths might be shorter, some breaths might be longer. Not trying to control the breath in any way, just letting it breathe itself. Being aware of the sensations of breathing. Being aware of your feet touching down into the earth, through the floor. And for tonight's meditation, maybe even having a sense that you're being held by the earth below you. Supported, strengthened by the earth. We'll invite a sense of relaxation into the body. Beginning with our forehead, just smoothing out the forehead. Allowing the eyes to soften. Maybe even inviting a half smile onto the eyes, relaxing the nervous system. Feeling a sense of relaxation through the mouth. Maybe inviting that half smile, the corners of the mouth lifting up. Loosening the jaw, the neck muscles. Inviting the shoulders to melt down in back of you. Feeling the front of the torso relaxing, along with the back of the torso. The arms and hands resting easily. And a sense of softening through the hips and the buttocks, rounding down into your seat. All the way down into the legs and your feet. And just for a moment, be aware of your whole body sitting here. Just having that sense of the whole body. And Jack Kornfield tells the story of an ancient temple in Hawaii called the Temple of Forgiveness. And no matter what you had done in that society, what terrible thing you had committed, or how you had gotten in trouble, if you could get yourself into the Temple of Forgiveness, you would be forgiven and sent back out. So in this practice this evening, you get to make your own body the temple of forgiveness. And as you sit comfortably and at ease, following the waves of your breath, bring your attention to the area of the heart, the spiritual heart in the center of your chest. Imagine that you're breathing in and out of the heart. And we take a moment to reflect on our own goodness, the ways you've been kind, generous, and compassionate with others. If for any reason that seems difficult for you to do, I imagine that there's at least one thing where you felt, oh yes, I've been kind, I've been compassionate in that way. So just remembering that viscerally in your body at this moment, what that felt like, your own goodness. So as the first forgiveness practice, I invite you to bring to mind someone you have hurt or harmed. It can be a person, an animal, or another sentient being. Take a moment to picture that being and sense how they may have been impacted by your actions. Notice what arises inside of you in response. See if you can hold a loving space for you and that being. And silently recite or say in your own way, in the ways that I have hurt or harmed you, out of my fear and pain, out of my confusion, anger, hurt, or misunderstanding. I ask your forgiveness. I ask your forgiveness. And allow yourself to receive this forgiveness. Let it ease your body and lighten your heart. If there's any difficult emotions arising at this time along with the forgiveness practice, just know that that's a natural part of being forgiving, of inviting forgiveness. And again, you can just see if you can hold a loving space, a loving awareness for whatever arises along with the practice of forgiveness. Maybe there's grief or sorrow, maybe there's fear. If it's helpful, you can place a hand on your heart, just to be in connection with that inner goodness of yours, to remind yourself of your inner goodness. So just recognizing what's here in this moment. Allowing it to be here. Just noticing how it expresses itself in your body. Maybe there are sensations like tingling or pressure or tightness, pounding heart. Just noticing how it manifests in the body, whatever emotions you might be experiencing at this moment. And then surrounding it with compassion, whatever it is. May I hold the suffering with great compassion. And if your own compassion that you can offer in this moment doesn't feel large enough for you to contain or hold the difficulty that might be here, you can always invite another being, a higher being, to join you in this practice. In Buddhism, it might be the Buddha himself, Kuan Yin, the Bodhisattva of compassion, or someone from your tradition, from your spiritual tradition, if you don't follow Buddhism so much. Just being a witness for you as you practice compassion, as you practice self-forgiveness. And for the second forgiveness practice, I invite you to turn towards forgiving yourself for the ways you may have harmed another being and the ways you may have harmed yourself, abandoned yourself, caused yourself pain. Just take a moment to recall those times or time. Notice the feelings that might arise in response and hold them with loving attention as best as you can. And we'll silently recite, in the ways I have hurt or harmed myself or another, or betrayed myself or another, out of fear and pain, out of confusion or hurt, anger or misunderstanding, I offer myself forgiveness. I offer myself forgiveness. I will start over again. I release myself from the past. I forgive myself. Feel how you can hold yourself with mercy and tenderness in this moment. Just recognizing what is here, what is arising. allowing it to be here. Simply sensing how it expresses itself in the body. Offering it great tenderness and loving care towards yourself. So we'll sit in silence together for several more minutes. Just being with this practice and deepening into it. And I'll ring the bell when the time of meditation is coming to an end. As we come to the end of the meditation period, imagine again that you're breathing in and out of the heart. Notice the state of your heart in this moment. And again, perhaps placing a hand on the heart, and just simply feeling the gentle rise and fall of the breath in the palm of your hand. And whatever is present at the heart, including it all with a loving and caring and kind attention. May all beings be well and happy. May all beings be connected to their goodness. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be protected from inner and outer harm. And may all beings live with ease. We can sit together a few more minutes quietly, or if there's any comments or questions, just sharing how the practice was for you this evening, feel free. And of course, I think I forgot the last two times, but if there's anyone online that wants to make a comment or ask a question, please feel free to do so. I'll check the chat as well. So people found it helpful, this particular topic. Yes.
I thought you gave such a beautiful and multi-perspective explanation on forgiveness. And I personally just feel like that word is so foreign to me. I don't know what that feeling is. And even after all your beautiful explanation, I still don't.
Do you have a sense that you don't connect with it viscerally in your body, or just the word forgiveness? Which aspect of it is it that you don't connect with?
I think it's more of the first. That's a great question. I think initially it's the first, which is the bodily emotional sensation. I think the second, there is a intellectual part that is also a little vague, and I don't know if I'm just resistant to it.
Yeah. So the first aspect about feeling it viscerally in your body, oftentimes a lot of people have a hard time just connecting with what's happening in the body, period. A lot of people even don't have a sense of the body. So a lot of times just even inviting oneself to begin to feel the sensations in the body. A lot of times people can begin, it's easiest to feel something in the hands and in the feet. There's more sensation normally present, tingling, vibrating, but this is not really about forgiveness. So it could be just more that, there's not a connection to the word. And I know that I didn't have a connection or even a resistance to that for many years, this word forgiveness. So I just really have come to think of it, just including it as a self-compassion practice or a compassion practice, where I'm just opening myself, in this case, to reflecting on any harm that I might have created towards myself, any kind of very harshness or judgment towards myself, as sort of a period of reflection. Oh my gosh, I can't believe, I said that to myself. It's kind of like if a friend comes to you and says, I'm really hurting right now because I did this horrible thing, and you're just sitting there and offering compassion, maybe even just by listening, or by saying, just offering a few words of kindness or encouragement. And so I kind of feel compassion to be, or forgiveness to be, a similar practice. So maybe replacing the word forgiveness with compassion might be helpful, and that this is just maybe a particular aspect of compassion, so that's how it feels more comfortable and natural to me. And I don't know if that could be helpful to you.
I think that makes a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. What's your name, please?
I'm Sharon.
Sharon, okay. Yeah, nice to see you, Sharon. So, yeah.
I think part of the intellectual confusion was that, there's a Christian tradition, like in the biblical sense of forgiveness, and, I think I used to think that it was something that you did to the other person, and then, then there's a lot of people who will interpret it as what you do to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, that's all kind of part of that confusion with that specific word. But I think, I think the way that you put it in terms of the broadness of, that general feeling, bodily sensation, embodiment experience of compassion, in that sense, it makes a lot more sense. Because that's more innate and sort of broader.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's good feedback, to just open it up more and broaden it more and understanding of that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your comments and for your question as well. It's very helpful. Yeah. Can be a very loaded word anyway, so yeah.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. I also wanted to say that in addition to the silence that's being offered here at the New Year's Eve meditation, I think there's a whole schedule for New Year's Eve. I also wanted to say, or let you know, there's something that I've done, where I haven't done it since the beginning of COVID because I don't think it was happening so much. But before, at a church, St. Paul's, I think it's closer to Bankers Hill, they have a beautiful labyrinth walk on New Year's Eve. And it's basically in the basement of the church. The path is lit by candlelight, and everyone walks together silently and reflecting maybe on the year, reflecting on one's actions. And you pass each other on the path, and then there's normally people that might play a cello or a piano. It's a very beautiful thing. I think it's happening at 6 p.m. I'm not at all connected to the church, but I've gone several years in a row, and I just wanted to put it out there that is also available. It's a very beautiful experience. I think, like I said, St. Paul's Church, Cathedral, actually. So someone is writing in and saying, interestingly, I'm feeling a lot of pain on my upper body after the meditation. I don't know if it's something related or not, but it's interesting. Yeah, thank you for sharing. So in this practice of self-compassion, it's really important to sort of bring it from the mind to the body. So here we're in mindfulness, we're not so much investigating with the head, but we try to bring it down into the body. So you're already on the right path by, just feeling the sensations that have come up for you in the body and just recognizing, allowing, bringing them some compassion to them if they feel challenging or if they feel unpleasant. Just note that, unpleasant or challenging. Or, maybe even instead of using the word pain, you might investigate in the body, well, what are actually the sensations that I'm feeling that I'm labeling as pain? Is there pressure? Is there tightness? And then again, just inviting a general sense of openness, of loving attention, and that's really all that's required. You become aware there's sensations in the body and you offer it kindness. It's not so much about figuring out, well, what is this really about? If you keep sitting, it's probably going to reveal itself. Not so much of a head response is required as much as just simply being, feeling the sensations in the body. And the wisdom of the body will reveal itself and speak to you, at least from my humble experience. So, and there's not a way for me to ask you how to pronounce your name, but I think it's Beiruz. And I apologize if I say your name incorrectly, but I'm very grateful that you wrote in. Thank you so much. So I think in the honor of time, my buddy David, fellow volunteer, is going to come up and just say a few words. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your practice.
Hi everyone, my name is David. I'm your host for tonight. As was said, there is a New Year's Eve celebrations happening here. There's a potluck at 7 p.m. If you're interested, at 9 p.m. there is a talk on the history of the temple. And then I hear there's a rager happening right before midnight with a silent meditation. So you can all be here and you can hear everyone else yelling and screaming while you're silent. I also hear it's sober, so that will be different for some of us. The official announcements are that we opened up the Dharma Temple 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, priests, gurus, teachers. They're not looking for students. They are simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night, there are different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. There's a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone struggling with addiction, and our food redistribution program meets every Thursday at 5 p.m. They usually start a little bit before that. We have classes and programs every day, and everything offered is always free. The full schedule is on our website. It's also posted above the shoe rack. There's a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to take it and return it when you are done with it. Please straighten up your cushion, your seat before you head out. And thank you for being here. We wish you well and hope to see you again.
Thank you, and may you have a peaceful ending to the old year and greeting the new year with ease and grace.